We're going to start it again, part 2. We're going to go over a few topics, some piece of advice we can give you about the club fitting parts of the process of lie angles, loft direction, how they have an effect on the ball flight and how we want to fit it. So lie angle and loft direction. Where's my phone? Woody, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah,
so we say be careful fitting lie angle to ball flight.
One of the things I try to never do is adjust ball flight with lie angle. You see it all the time. The guy slices it out, make the iron more upright so he won't slice as much. You're trying to counteract something that you're just going to ask for trouble. If you get the person the right lie angle, they will consistently hit more repeatable shots. Maybe you won't help their ball flight so much; they might still be slicing it like crazy, but they're going to hit more repeatable slices. And as a club fitter, that's critical. I see one time where someone comes more over the top, and they're digging the club over here, and you got to give them 4 degrees upright, and all they can do is hit dead poles or blocks, and they can't play golf that way. So I'm not going to fit lie angle that way. However, how you measure it is really important. Fortunately, now we're able to measure dynamic lie at impact. We could never, we could never do that before. We used to use a lie board and then the line and the ball, and we now know that they're better than nothing. It's just not.
Well, line on the ball is definitely better than the lie board. So if you use a lie board, it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's a future slide that I have up there that we'll get to. That's amazing. So lie angle, when you think about where the loft of the golf club points, it can be a combination of things. So I can get this loft direction where it points straight, and I can have it point straight like this, and I can have it point straight like that. Does that make sense? So the loft could be pointing in the same direction, but with totally different lie angles. So what we're looking for, the best we can, is we'd like for the sole to be relatively level to the ground. It doesn't have to be perfect. There are some tendencies where, like a preference I might even have is I prefer for better players to have a lie angle most probably more toe down than ever having the heel on the ground, because the club will interact better with the grass and the turf. But the best you can, you want that golfer to have a relatively square face to your path and be relatively level. So if that makes sense, square to your path, because you can get some really crazy things like this or like this. And when you see it on your launch monitors, if you're not really getting your impact location and getting dynamic loft, you can get thrown off a little, okay? So, measuring dynamic lie angle. Dynamic is not at address, that's static. So static lie angle is only for posture's sake. It doesn't really tell you what the lie angle is going to be during the impact interval. So things that measure dynamic lie, high-speed camera systems like Enzo, Gears, Foresight. Another way you could try to get some dynamic lie is vertical line on a golf ball. I'm going to show you in the next slide. And then lie board, again, it's better than nothing. You can use a lie board understanding that if you can get the golfer to make contact with the board at the exact same time that they hit the golf ball, which is almost never, right? Because when you hit the board first, I don't know if you've ever seen a high-speed cam, the golfer's going to hit the board, it's like the plexiglass, the board does this like surfer wave thing, the ball gets airborne in the air, and the club strikes the ball that's airborne. It's pretty cool. So be careful when you're just telling them to smack that board, because they are smacking the board, then the ball gets up in the air and it hits the ball. And the ball flies really nice all the time, doesn't it? Yeah. If you can have your members go out and play with a lie board, they'd be freaking awesome. Great. But reality is, it's very difficult to get the read, and also because if the person has a very closed face to their path, it's going to read toe down every time. If the person has a very open face to their path, it's going to read that the heel's hitting. So you can't fit to that because that's not really what their true lie angle is when they hit a decent shot. That's where the lie board can throw off the readings. So you get that person who's got that really bad late underneath move where they steepen the shaft and they go this way and the face is wide open. All of a sudden it's going to read like 3 degrees flat. Might not be, right? So it can be dangerous. but it's still better than nothing.
Made those mistakes plenty when we were learning club fitting before anybody knew anything. And you'd go, well, it's perfect on the live board, why can't he hit the golf ball?
Yeah.
Or it was way off on the live board, why could he hit it perfect? Now,
Well, they could if they
now we
played
know
off
why.
on
Well, now we know why, but we didn't know why back then.
Right. Really simple illustration here of a vertical line on the ball. Now, you can't get a perfectly vertical 90 degree, but do the best you can. Okay. If you have a camera though down the target line like this, and you have something that you could draw with V1, you can do a pretty good job of what vertical 90 degrees is. And there you go. So that's just showing you that if a golfer had a relatively square face to their path and they hit the golf ball in a good spot, that's pretty nice. So that line angle is really good for that golfer.
Is it just the Sharpie?
Oh yeah, yeah, just a Sharpie on a ball. Try to do your best to use one of those line drawer semicircle things and put it on the ball. Draw a straight line. Do your best to try to line it up. So if you're going to do it, try to be precise, just like when you putt. You don't just like you know, you line it up as precise as you can. So again, it's better than nothing. Now here is with GC2 with HMT. Here's a golf shot of a golfer with what I call relatively square path. So their swing is a little bit out to in, barely 3 degrees there. It's not that bad. Decent strike on the club face. Face the path, pretty good. It's about 1 degree. That's pretty nice. So the ball did not curve up. Actually, but the ball did actually curve to the right. Because in reality, this player has a 5-degree toe down at impact. So the true direction of the loft is face the path. Well, the face itself was a degree, 1.7 degrees left, but it's 5.2 degrees toe down. So the true loft of that face is actually to the right. Okay, sometimes you got to do a little bit of math gymnastics, like with any other launch monitor, but that's actually what you look at. So you can see that this person with this swing, with a reasonable swing, is toeing down a lot. Now there are several factors that could go into the reasons. Like, what would you say?
What could be droop of the shaft?
Could be.
Right? So the more the shaft droops, the more the line was going to be down. Right? Could be center gravity of the head. The more the center of gravity is further away, the more it's going to droop down.
How does a golf shaft move during a golf swing, during the downswing?
Load, unload, load, unload.
Right. Good. There's a lot, right? You go back there. There's a few things. But what is that club doing? What is the shaft doing as it's striking the ball? Now, some people believe that the shaft is bent backwards at impact. Does anybody believe that? Okay. It's true, right. Because every shaft that's moving correctly is going to have some sort of shaft droop and some sort of shaft deflection at the bottom. So every shaft actually is actually kicking a little forward and a little bit of down. That's because you're swinging this object that's got mass at the end, and you've got a shaft that actually has some movement to it. So what it's doing is it's trying to line up this way. The center of gravity of the club is trying to kick, it's trying to line up to the hands. So even if you have, shaft, or I would call it grip lean, or you can call it hosel lean, this shaft is still going to have a little bit of movement. Okay? So if you have something in your hands that maybe is unstable, it's not strong enough, flexing a little bit too much, the tip section's weak, you might get something like that. Or it's just that golfer is just steeping that shaft too much, and it's all golfer induced. So that's going to be up to you as golf professionals to try to figure out why, even though they made a reasonable swing, why they can't get that club level to the ground. Now you can see the next one here, where the lie angle reading is pretty good. So it's about a couple degrees only toe down. But the reason why is this golf shot is horrible, right? You look at that. That golfer came a little bit from the inside with a 9-degree open face, and that's what we're talking about. So that golfer went underneath really late like that. Face is open this way. So the lie angle reading is going to be good, but not if they made a reasonable swing. It's the same golfer, just one decent shot and one bad one. So if you were to square that face up, that club's going to toe down more. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if the face is more open in path, you're going to read, the club's going to read more upright, right? Or it's going to read more toe up. If the face is closed to path, it's going to read a lot more toe down relative to a square face to your path.
So how are you fitting this guy's lie angle? Just based on, I mean, however many shots you use, how are you, he's all across the board.
Actually, it's almost always between these. So this golfer's not going to have a closed face to path and then have one 9 degrees open. This golfer's either pretty close or open. That's their tendency. So I'm going to try to fit into the previous one. I'm gonna try to get them based on this swing to try to get them to either work on their golf swing to learn how to shallow out their swing a little bit so that their dynamic lie is going to be a little flatter. I might also give them some equipment that actually does not droop as much, so maybe they need a little bit more stable shaft, or maybe their line will just off. Yep.
At this point, have you already had the conversation about how much offset you think they need?
No. Offset is not a lie angle issue.
Yeah.
Offset, you're talking about a different axis, right? Lie angle is this way. Offset, you talk about where the face is relative to the shaft line.
But just in your general fitting process, you don't have a conversation about how to improve, what kind of a game improvement iron or anything like that.
Oh, that's an evaluation way prior.
Yeah.
I would think, yeah. That's in the initial, how often do you play, what are you looking for, where are you at? Yeah, Jamie?
What's your tolerances on lie angle?
Not very tolerant. Oh, you mean, not with equipment, you're talking about with my golfers?
Like that frame up there on the left. You saying that's?
Well, if that's Matt Dobbins, I'm okay with that. Where'd he go? Where'd you go, Matt?
You're bored to sleep.
It's okay. Usually for me, a couple degrees.
Down and up?
I'm not into the up part much. I'm not a fan of that. It just doesn't allow that golfer to get that club close to the ground and get sweet spot contact. So I'm okay if it's a little toe down because at least it gives them a little bit of room to hit the ball. If it's a little toeward, it's not that bad. Average golfer with equipment that's got a lot of mass out in the toe anyway, like a ping or something, it works fine.
I've never
All right.
fit to a positive, if you had a good path, never. You know,
Well, you try not to, but sometimes you're at the mercy of, you know who you get it with? You get that golfer who's really short, shorter than me, and they have a really flat swing also, and they come in there and you get that equipment and it just, no matter what you do, you just can't get the equipment flat enough. And they're the average golfer and they need a club like this.
Well, that's a problem.
Right, it's a problem,
That's a problem.
so
Because you
it's
can't give
rare.
a fourth club that you can bend flat enough.
Well, there are some.
Right.
You have to know what they are. So that's where it gets tricky, where you try your best to.
Hey, Kirk, in your
Sorry, Mike.
So what about the deflection with the steel shaft? You got to allow for a little bit of air under that toe as you go through the fitting with steel and metal shafts, obviously, don't you?
Compared to graphite,
Yeah.
Shaft's going to droop more by profile than it is whether it's graphite
Yeah,
or steel.
Right. So you can't fit a guy.
yeah, the kitty cat's one.
He's
Late
leaving
comer.
too. The cat. So you got to have a little bit of air though under the toe, I would imagine.
On which side?
I'm sorry.
On which side?
Under the toe of the club at address.
Oh, at address.
Yeah.
But it
I don't
dresses-
care how. I mean, that's a preference at address. Fuzzy Zeller used to set up like this, and he stands up more than anybody, and his clubs are end up here.
Right.
So static setup compared to dynamic angle. That's a preference that you have for your golfer, how you want it to kind of stand up. But yeah, I would agree that you'd hardly ever find a player that's able to address the club statically level and dynamically come in level. That would be really hard to do.
Right.
Because almost everybody's handle is going to be rising up a
Yeah.
little bit, and the shaft's
Yeah.
going to droop a
And
little.
just to go back to Woody for a second, through the years, you've moved a lot of clubs. What, without, I know David's here, but what companies can you move, and, can you bend the lie easily and what cannot be bent? Because what I'm thinking is,
I mean, Ping is one of the best. They'll from specs perspective, they'll really try and cover as much as they possibly as can be done.
yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit of
But-
an education for people because a lot of guys, like Kirk was saying before, 1 or 2 degrees, it's not the world, so a lot of times I'll just get the stock set. If we're going to be up there for an hour when it's 1 or 2 degrees flat or standard, just get the stock set and then see how the guy progresses with it and move them, rather than having to call the company, fight them, send it back, all this baloney. I know you're allowing time for that to be done if it's done early, but I mean, you guys have all the stuff to do it in-house, so I would think a lot of people would just get a stock set and you guys could tailor make it at the place for them. No, wouldn't that be easy?
Yeah, but some can be bent, some can, you're just talking about one aspect, right?
Yeah.
Just talking about lie. What about the length? What about the grip size? What about the shaft?
Right.
There's
Well,
just
the
too
length
many
is an issue.
aspects to do that.
But you can move most clubs now. You can move most irons.
Most irons you can move a little bit, yes.
All right.
Yeah, the harder the metal is, like a Zexio iron,
Yeah.
something like that, you can't move it, you'll just snap it.
Right.
So when it's really designed to be a real super distance iron, super strong frame, housel's made of a strong metal, you
Uh-huh.
can't bend those. So they're at a real risk to try to
So there
bend
are
them.
some that can't be moved at all.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, they'll just snap.
Right.
Yeah, there's no
And
flexibility.
Again, you got to know your client, right? So if you know I've got a really hard casting and I got to, get it to whatever line you're looking for, you might not want to give them that club if you think you're going to change it down the road if you're going to work on their golf swing,
Right.
right?
Who of the major manufacturers would you say you can't move? So Zexio.
Well, Zexio, you can move the Zexio forged, can't move the Zexio. Can't. Some of the Japanese companies that are selling their distance irons, you cannot touch them. They will just snap. Yeah, Eric?
Can you go back and talk about the line on the ball and the club face and
Yeah.
explain the different meanings, flat, upright, how it would look, the line would look on the club?
Oh, yeah. So if you look at that right there, if you saw that line right there, and if you have the golfer hit the ball reasonably with a square face, and all of a sudden you see the tilt of the line to either side. So if you notice, if this line all of a sudden now is going diagonally down towards the toe, that means that the golfer's club is toe down. And conversely, if you notice that the golfer's line is actually going from high toe to low heel, that club is coming in toe up. So that's how you get it. And it's very rare that you'd find when you put a line on a ball with a reasonable swing that it's going to be a lot. Because when you look at that, I mean, if you see the golfer really a lot and then you measure that, that's 10, 15 degrees.
If you see it off a lot, chances of the face is really closed or really open.
Yeah. So face to path, again, comes into play, Eric. So if you see that golfer and all of a sudden you see curves, you see the launch monitor, you see a lot of face closing or open, you're going to see the lines get thrown off more. Any other questions on live? We're going to actually go over here, talk a little bit about line loft direction. This is a preference for me. It's not a rule at all, but usually I prefer flatter over upright for golf clubs, especially for wedges, so that you get that golfer, so that the heel doesn't interact with the grass and the turf. The toe's got a lot more bounce and going to have more relief.
I would add to that, especially you get your average guy that maybe he has a lot of handle rise, okay, with his full shot, but they don't with their wedges. That's why it's really important to go flatter there. Because you might have to go more upright in their irons, and then their wedges, with that short chip shot, they wonder why they can't make contact, because someone fit them and made them all 64 degrees when it should be 61 because there's no handle rise.
Like, you mean like that? Like the next slide that I was... Progressive lie angle. You can have different types of lie angles. You can have the longer irons, and I've seen it work. The longer clubs that are drooping more, you can actually have them less upright. I know that's a pain when you want to order it that way. But just to tell you that there are different ways. You could have the longer irons not as flat, and then you could have the wedges not as upright. So you might have your gap, instead of typically, say, 4 to 7, you have a 3.5 degree gap between them. You might only have like a 2 degree gap. Just a way to do it. Yeah, Charlie?
Is club head speed the biggest factor in shaft droop? Talking about longer irons having more shaft droop than shorter irons?
Club head speed, possible. The other is the center of mass is further from your handle. The shaft is longer. That's another.
Obviously the flex, Charlie, the more flexible the shaft, the more it's going to droop.
You're talking about equally in a set, right, Charlie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say it's because the object is getting further from you, so it's got more of a chance. Some other times the shafts themselves and the longer irons actually have a lower bend point to them. So they might even get weaker at the bottom. It's a possibility, maybe.
Yep.
That was just a total guess. But it sounded good, right? You bought it, it's okay. Okay, some club geek terminology. Not that you want to use this around your members and everything, but I'm sure you hear it. Spin loft. What's spin loft?
Compression.
How was it created?
Tack angle and dynamic loft.
Okay, right. So you got the difference, the angle between the direction that the club is traveling and the amount of dynamic loft. So you get that golfer who tends to hit down on the ball more with a certain amount of loft, and you get another golfer who does not hit down on the ball as much. Now, this is in the perfect world of center strikes. Right, so when we talk about this stuff here about, oh, you know, the whole D-plane thing, the whole D-plane isn't a fantasy land, okay? It's got to be struck absolutely in the center of gravity, perfect, and then you could start talking about all this stuff of what we think the ball's going to do. But at least it's a nice guideline. You say, oh, okay, so if the person has more loft and a person hits down a little bit more, delivers it, more chances it's going to create more spin. If you have a little bit less between them, then the chances are they're probably not going to spin the ball as much. It's a nice guideline. About right? CG, center of mass. Like if we use COG like a lot of other people do, when we say COG, what does COG mean to golf professionals? Cost of goods. So, right? That's what we learned in PGM school. So we get that, right? So let's just go with CG. It's a shorter way of doing it. Everyone knows what the CG is, center of mass is?
Hey Kirk, is
Yeah.
that so? When I know the club head itself has a center of mass or a center CG.
CG.
And then when you put the shaft on it,
Yep.
now that entire club has a CG that's kind of floating outside the head, right? Is that correct?
Well, club head CG does not change. You have a different measurement of center of gravity or center of mass of the club.
Of the club.
Yeah, that's a different thing.
And so, okay, so it's still the CG of the club head that's going to cause the gearing, not the CG of the overall club.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, so the CG, or this is a projected CG on the face, that right there, there's a certain point in this head where there's the center of it, right, where it balances like, if I can do it, let my hand there cold. Like that, right? That's the center of the mass right there. So that's not going to change even if you put a shaft on it. Then you put a golf club on it, and now you've got this. Now it doesn't have a grip on it. Now you've got, there's a center of mass of this club right here. Now if you put a grip on it, you're going to have more weight here, so then the center mass is probably going to move down a little bit towards the handle here. So this is going to be the center of mass of the golf club. And it's floating somewhere around here, right?
Yeah.
Because it's between the hands and between the center mass. If here you draw a straight line, it's floating here. Yeah. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, but that doesn't have much to do with the gearing of
No.
of the impact.
No, what Nick is talking about is, so if you have a center of mass of this, if you move that center of mass higher or lower, you're going to change the way the entire club feels. But what happens to the golf ball is based on the CG of the club head itself. And the direction the club is traveling can have an effect on that. Moment of inertia. MOI, we hear all the time. So we hear about, oh, where's that CG? And then we hear, oh, this one's higher moment of inertia, or MOI. Does anyone know how to describe it? What MOI is? Want a little demonstration? How about?
It's resistance to twisting at impact, right?
Do me a favor, John. I'm going to throw this at you, and I want you to deflect it.
Don't miss.
Okay? I'm going to throw this at you, and I want you to deflect it. Okay? What's the difference?
Mass.
Which one's going to take more torque to change its direction? It's got higher MOI. That's all it is. So all it is it takes more force or torque to change its acceleration and its rate and direction it's moving. So that thing right there had very low MOI. My laptop's got very high MOI.
So you can basically hit the laptop straighter than it can hit the garbage.
Well, here's the thing. You can actually, those two objects can be going in the same direction equally. But if something tries to deflect it, that sucker's going to be deflected way offline, where that's going to keep moving in its direction better. Just visualize that with a golf club now. So you've got a golf club that they talk about as high MOI or low MOI. It just means that if you don't strike that center point, that a lower MOI object will be deflected more. So the face angle can change, the club's direction can change, where if you have a high MOI, that means that it takes more force to move that club offline to change its face angle. That's why if they're not striking the ball in the center, it helps when you have a club that's got higher MOI. Yeah.
Okay, so with putter manufacturers, they're big on this, right? They're always touting their MOI. But that MOI is not going to account for a very poor stroke, is it?
No.
No.
So it's really kind of just a marketing tool for them.
Well,
A putter?
well, talk about putter then. So let's talk about force, right? How much torque? How fast is a putter moving?
The impact, depending on length of stroke and so forth and timing.
Let's say a 15-foot putt.
2.5 miles an hour,
Right. Compared to the average driver speed?
depending, like somebody like yourself, 105.
How'd you know?
Been reading up on you.
Terrible.
In your bio.
Terrible. It's embarrassing. 105. So if an object is moving at 105 miles per hour, and all of a sudden it's going to try to be deflected by the same golf ball, compared to a putter that's moving at 2.5 miles per hour, and which one weighs more?
Which one weighs more?
Which head weighs more?
The putter head.
Putter head, right? So the putter head weighs more, is moving slower. Which one's going to be affected more by MOI?
The driver.
Yeah. So it's
Not
insignificant in a putter.
It's just
not
an
moving
advertising
fast enough.
lark.
It weighs more than a golf ball. So the amount of torque that is going to take to move that putter head offline is not enough from a golf ball. Again, totally my opinion.
I wouldn't say it's irrelevant, it's just not the same effect that you're going to have on a
So
putter.
But
it's
it's
only,
not as
it's only keeping
significant
it
as that
square,
lead
it's
view
not
blade.
the
Right.
liveliness of the hit?
Well, if you were going to hit the putter at 100 miles per hour, it's going to have a lot more effect. Yeah. But it's not going to have as much effect if you're moving the putter at 2.5 miles per hour. The collision of that ball, the acceleration of that object, and hitting it off center does not have enough to twist it off its axis. Like that mini golf center shaft and the blade goes, right?
The rubber
COR and CT rating. You don't really have to know this, but this is just how the USGA measures these clubs now. COR is
Copious restitution.
right.
But that's not how they don't do that, use it.
Right.
anymore. Or they reserve the right to, I think. They don't
Right.
test them that way, they reserve the right to.
Right. So what is CT rating?
Well, that's how the USGA developed a way to test golf. The problem with CORs, you're gonna take the club head off the shaft, you gotta mount it, you gotta fire a ball into it to measure COR.
Right.
It's very difficult. So you can't have portables COR, you can't, you go to a golf tournament, they can't check it, so they developed a way to measure with the shaft on, with the club head, so they go to a tournament, put it in a device and
Right.
bounce
Right.
up and off it and
It's a pendulum test. So do you know what CT means? What does it stand for? I'm going to take your geek card away.
I'm sorry, I can't remember. Lodged in.
Characteristic timing. All it is how long that ball stays on the face. Is the ping
I remember
test. Okay, now you do. Right? So it's a lot easier. You can go somewhere. They got this little pendulum that goes ping. It goes in the face. If it bounces too fast, oh, it's might not be conforming. There's a rating for it too. 257 is a rating that is the max legal limit. So everyone's trying to create drivers right around 239 with a plus minus to try to get close.
And just so you know, guys like Pete's Golf, we can't buy that formula to test drivers. They won't sell it to us. They sell it to the manufacturers so they can test their products before sending them out to the market, but they won't sell it to a non-club manufacturer because they're, you know, hey, you want the hottest driver, right? So you go measure 10 of them. They don't want it to happen. They kind of made a deal with the manufacturer when they came up with the test to not sell it to anybody. They patented the formula.
So here you go. Projected CG onto the face. Everyone hears about, wow, the driver is low CG or low spin or forgiving and MOI and all these terms. This right here is a driver that I just marked the progressive, well, the projected.
It's a projected CG,
Right.
and you have it as moving as you're moving the weights around in that driver.
Right. So let's see if I can get this.
There's on that driver. There's 4 different weight positions he put them in. And that's why there's 4 dots, right? So it moved as he changed those, as he moved those positions around.
Well, so
Here
those
we go.
colored, those little colored dots in the middle of that white square, or that white patch is how much the center of gravity has moved.
Moved, correct. When he moved the weights.
On this particular driver.
So they've moved nothing, basically.
On this one, not much at all. Correct. Some of them move a lot more, some of them move very little, depending on the design of it. Yeah, so some do a better job. So just to show you here, so if you have, whoops, never mind. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's just go, that's where, that's the height of it, right? So anything above that, what's the ball gonna do? All right, so you're hitting above that COG or CG and anything below it, right? So when you look at it this way, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass around these 2 drivers here, and you'll get a good idea. These are 2 drivers that projected CG is marked on it, and just look at it and compare it. So you pass it around the room. So if you have a driver where the projected CG is higher on the golf club, that would mean that that club has a lot more room below that point, so it's going to launch lower and spin more. Then you have room for that driver to have a strike above that center of gravity. So let's say that CG line, let's say, is right there. This golfer is going to have to hit the ball high in the face to try to get reasonable numbers. Does that make sense? Now, some golfers do hit it up there pretty well, and they're conditioned up there, and they hit it a little higher in the face, and that's the best for them. You want to find them a driver that is up there. Those are drivers like Nike did really good with that. Pretty high CG. PXG is pretty good for that. Now, you get most golfers that tend to err, if anything, on low face strikes, I would think. I think majority of who we teach and we try to help, to kind of, right, they pull up a little bit on it and hit a little no in the face. It's just natural. Or they add a little bit of loft. So now if you had that, and you had a driver that's got a pretty low projected center of gravity, that means that you've got more room above that than you do below it. So this golfer is going to do a lot better with a much lower projected CG driver. Now we're only talking about the height right now. We're not even talking about the depth of where it is, which now goes into more the MOI factor. So the further back,
The further back, the higher the MOI.
but what's tricky about it?
Right. So if I was looking here, well, I want my driver low CG. Well, in order to do that, I've got to move the weight more forward here. When I do that, I lower the MOI. I say, oh no, I want more MOI. Oh great, well I move my weight further back, right? So I got my weight back here, I got great MOI. When I move that weight back, that projected CG climbs up the face.
Well, why though is, this is not how we hit a ball with a driver, is it? This is when you soul the driver. But when you hit a golf ball, it looks like this. So if you notice how the sole of the golf club is actually angling upwards, so if you move that weight back, it's really moving back and up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, forward and backwards, you know, like it's more like this. Now, some companies do a better job of keeping it low and moving it back, and some companies just shove it all in the front. Some other companies don't really care about that low spin stuff. They just want a really stable golf club. And so if that's the case, you're going to have a lot of stability here, So just like I showed you right there, it takes a lot more to knock that sucker off its axis, but it's probably going to project at a little higher center of gravity, so it's not going to have that high launch, low spin as much. But not everybody needs that. So again, it's really specific to the golfer. What are you putting in their hands?
The technology, the manufacturers are getting better and better and better at getting it back and down. Whether it's changing weights, whether it's taking weight out of the new Pig G series where they got that butterfly effect on the top. That's getting that weight so they can get that to.
Carbon crowns, TaylorMade does it, Callaway does it, Cobra does it. One company does it better than everybody. They have the thinnest one. You can move the weight further down. Other companies, what they'll do is they'll remove excess weight out where you don't need it, and again try to move it down. So everyone's trying to move it back a lot and hopefully down also. Because then you have a lot more area above that CG to where the golfer can strike it so they can launch a little higher and get a little lower spin.
So I get a question.
Yeah, I was wondering on that Titleist driver why the weight is not square to the face. It's kind of on the angle in the back. Is there an easy explanation?
Yeah, because when they're trying to move their CG, right? They're trying to move it this way, right? So if I'm going to move it more in the toe, I want to put it more over here. If I want it more in the heel, I want it back over here. If I did it this way, I wouldn't move it as much. This doesn't move it very much.
I got you.
If you see, by the way, see how far back this is? You see on the fairway wood, it's much more forward.
Yeah.
It moves it a lot more on the fairway wood because it's more forward. It's affecting this CG a lot more. But the problem is, if you did with a driver, you would have lower MOI. It wouldn't be as easy to
Distance gains are
easy to
greater
hit.
in the fairway would I
So-
think,
Yes,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
If you change it, yeah. If you measure the difference between how much a driver moves compared to fairway moves a good amount, and the driver only moves not even a millimeter.
Just remember one thing about these adjustable things. They are great. But when they're designing them, they got to move weight to support that adjustments, which means they may have to put weight in places they don't want. Right? So if you've got a sliding bar down bottom here, you've got to support that sliding bar. You've got to put extra weight to support that. That's going to move the center of gravity. It's going to be good because it can make things more adjustable, and it can be bad if that's not what you need. So with all adjustable drivers, they can be great if it can help you, and they can be bad because they're putting stuff where you don't want it.
Okay. Here's just a little list of so far from 2017 products that we've seen through measuring things and testing clubs. So when we say low spin drivers, it's because the center of gravity is low. So projected low on the club, and it's also designed that way. Got a chart that actually has every manufacturer's center of gravity for height and depth. You see like a My Golf Spy. All right, so they got that, you can see it. TaylorMade, M1s, Cobra LTD, LTD Pro, and F7 Plus. Callaway Epic Sub-Zero with the weight in the front, and Mizuno JPX 900. Those are some pretty low spin drivers if you need them. Okay, to move on?
Hang on.
Oh,
You may proceed.
I'll send it to you anyway, don't worry. Okay? Forgiven drivers, high MOI or CG back, right? Every Ping G, SF Tech, LS, all very forgiving high MOI drivers. Cobra LTD, so now that's interesting. So Cobra LTD is the lowest CG and further back. So it's a unique club that they have. F7, F7 Plus, again, very similar, very low, very far back. Sub-Zero with the weight in the back is higher MOI than the regular Epic by 100 points. Yeah.
Couldn't believe that when we first found out about it. There's no way it could be, but
More stable than, but the regular Epic can move horizontal CG. So you can move the weight out towards the toe and out towards the heel, so you can get that golfer taking care of a little bit of their toe hits and heel strikes in that way. But the Sub-Zero weight in the back, higher MOI. Titleist 917D2. Pretty stable. That's why it fits. That's why Titleist drivers fit across the board well. That's why Pings fit across the board well. Because they're not that super massive low spinner. A lot of people can play. If you get the right amount of loft, it launches about good enough, spins low enough, looks nice, sounds good, type of driver. And PXG. So if you saw that driver that we passed around, you saw the difference in the height where the dot is. PXG is pretty high. So it's kind of like the ping.
Who designed it?
I don't know. Who designed it? Nice. Oh, whoop. Go back. Hello. There we go. Oh, right there. Why is this thing doing this?
There you
So,
go. You got it.
Fairwoods. We got it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I want a hot Fairwood. Give me something hot. Anything. If it's XR, XR Pro, what do they have now? Whatever, right there, yeah. They're pretty low spinning, hot missile launchers. Except for maybe like the Fusion, right?
Fusion's, yeah.
Yeah, Fusion is kind of CG back, spinny a little bit, right? But through the years, Callaway's been unbelievable with it. TaylorMade M1, M2. For ball speed, really good. Probably M2 more than M1 for ball speed. Been really good. Just be careful with the lie angles with these two clubs. The M2 is extremely upright. The M1's not. So then I have the M2 Tour now, which is pretty flat and really nice looking. That could be a nice option for someone who wants an M2, but they want flatter. Titleist Fairwoods, really good. Very good ball speeds. Huge improvements of what they did. Forgiven Fairwoods, always pings, great, right? Really stable, easy. Get up off the air, off the ground. Go on toe hits, heel strikes, playable. Not really low spins, so you're not going to get that missile launcher. Everyone doesn't need it. M2, pretty stable. Cobra LTD F7s, low CG back. Titleist 917 F2 and the PXG 3 wood. Pretty stable. All right. Most adjustable woods, CG in flight. Callaway Epic. That thing on the slider back there really moves it. Does a tremendous job of moving that CG. Projected CG, right? Cobra F7, F7 Plus in the driver, moves it a ton. TaylorMade M1 driver, Fairwood hybrid. Really does a good job of moving it. But remember, it's moving it because it's really up front also. So since it's up front, as you said, it does a good job moving it.
Yeah.
What do you
It's
think
not
of the
as
weight?
stable.
What do you think of that thing that goes forward and backwards?
Does nothing.
Okay.
Does nothing.
Does it feel different though?
Well, it could feel different, but
Yeah.
it does, when you talk about numbers wise, it does nothing.
Yeah.
It definitely changes the feel. It might change it emotionally, but it's not working like you think it's working.
So how would you use that when you got a guy and
I would change it more. If the guy says, "Oh, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel solid," I would change it.
which way do you usually move something if you want it to feel solid?
I usually move it back.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you move it back. Feels more because they're not hitting it in the center.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Here's a simple way of I'll use your finger. You see the angle in which this driver hangs? You can hang this way, driver can hang that way. I hope I have that. There we go. So there are two drivers right there with very different center of gravity positions. Ping K15. Any of you have success with that driver?
Yeah.
Right? Why? What did it do?
Big old weight in the heel.
Right? It's really good. Look how much angle there is to that. That's because the weight's over there. That driver right there hangs more toe down. So that's going to play more fade bias. The one that's got more angle to it, it's going to play a lot more draw bias. That's where the mass is in the head. So that's a way you can take a driver and say, oh, what are you playing over there? And you go like this and go, you see that the golfer's got a lot of trouble hitting it that way, and that driver's hanging this way, go, look out, right? You may want that person to have something kind of like that. Might help. Is that what you
Wow. This driver was tremendous, by the way, and they couldn't sell it very much because people didn't like the way the bump looked. And then on the SF Tech, they put it without the bump, and all of a sudden they started selling it like crazy because it really worked. But people didn't like to see that bump. Take the bump away, and they were able to do without internally, and oh wow, this is great.
So Kirk,
Yeah.
you put the hot melt in the toe, then you flip it the other way, right?
Yeah.
Keep it
If you
first.
put enough. Now, hopefully this makes sense. There's a big difference between just adding weight somewhere and displacing weight.
Okay.
So let's say I have something that weighs 200 grams, and I add 10 grams to one side, and I weigh 210 with that. Compared to if I take 10 out of that side and throw it on the other side, it's moving more.
Oh,
All right.
right, right.
Anybody could just like build a driver and just go, put it there, right? And just add weight. And now the thing's a sledgehammer. Very difficult to be able to move weight from a certain area and to move it in a different location and not make it heavier and perform well. That's where guys that are or women that are way smarter than us are doing that stuff. Way beyond, you know, what we can do is, because we're not engineers. You have an engineering degree.
Yeah.
I'm not an engineer. I got a good understanding, but not to that level.
When
That's
you
where they
sit
came
and
up
talk
with
to these guys
composite
design
crowns
these
and all that,
clubs,
Sorry?
That's why they came up with all the composite crowns and all that, to take the weight out of there and move it somewhere else.
you know,
They try. Now some do it better because they use composite, but then they still add a lot of gluing and adhesives. It still weighs the same. So some other companies do a lot better with less weight on it, and the bonding process they use a lot less weight.
that's the biggest thing. Everyone says, oh, they got a composite crown, it's got to be lighter. Maybe not. Certainly 5 years ago they couldn't do it. They had to put too much glue to get it to stay together. That just added the weight right back.
And if you don't do it right, it breaks,
So if you
which
move the weight
can
around
happen,
the
right?
drivers now, you test it, you should be able to see it. And
How much time do we have? See?
We're kind of there.
Kind of there.
I mean, this is all interesting stuff, though.
You know what I'd rather do then? I'd rather do this part here. The adjustable hollow thing. Woody, can you? All right. So, when you have all these adjustable drivers, you talk about what it does and the hosels and it does all that. So there was one company that claimed that you can change the loft and the face angle independently from each other. There were some claims like that. But what is it really doing? So what do the hosels really do? Is it really changing the loft of the club? What is it really just changing?
How it sits.
Is it changing the
Facing.
face angle? It's the same loft. So Woody, can you measure that? Oh, here. Yeah, you're.
You're going to break it, of course.
So the way that we measured this here. So that people in the back can see.
Did you bring a wrench by any chance?
Did you bring one?
I think I
I didn't bring one.
you guys are in.
All right. So what we try to do when we put it in here is, first thing is, we just naturally just let it sit how it sits. So then what happens is, so Woody, can you let it just let go of it, you know? And you just got this driver in there, and it just sits. And it sits a certain way when you put it in. So a driver will sit a little bit. I can't get it from here. You can't quite see how it sits, but I don't know if you can see that there, but it sits a little bit open, if anything, naturally. So some companies sits a little bit open based on the setting of the company, and some sits a little bit more closed. And you can tell right away when you put it on the ground, so you don't really need that too much. Okay, so then what we'll try to do here is, to the best of our ability, we will try to get the lie angle to match its scoring lines, which again is subjective because some companies like to put their scoring lines a little different than the true shape of the driver. The new M2, they put the scoring lines more upright than the head itself, so that gets complicated. So right now, can you see that in the back? Is it clear enough? Now that's better, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to get the level of the scoring lines there towards the center. So we're trying to get that right there, and then we're going to measure the face. So let's try to measure the true loft of how that's playing. So again, there's human error there. It's not perfect, but to the best of his ability. There we go.
got it about 10 1/4.
Okay. So now that's his measurement. You know, maybe I'll go in there and I see 9.75. Maybe I'll see 10.5 or something, but it's probably within that. So now we'll make an adjustment to that.
And it is 10.5, supposedly.
Yeah, so pretty good.
I didn't know what it was.
Let me put this down. Okay.
So this, that's supposed to be
Change it
just,
change it the most you can.
Yeah.
Go to,
I'm gonna go to A4. But we should have started less.
what was it?
We started A1.
Oh, that's go to like E.
You wanna go A3?
Yeah, go there. So Tyler's chart says that A3 is the most upright end. They say, and what I like about that chart is they don't just say the most loft, they also say the most closed. Because effectively all you're doing is you're just taking that same 10.25 and you're just pointing it this way.
You know, if you guys
Does
look
that
at
make
this,
sense?
if you look at this chart, if you look online, you don't see this column over here. If you to sell tiles, they send you this, where they tell you what happens to the face when you make those adjustments.
Right. All that Hasel's doing is it's the tips are crooked, right? They're like this. That's all it is. So when you put it in the head, depending on the angle you put that in, it either closes the face, or if you put it in this way, it opens a face. So if it's 10.25 this way, it's 10.25 that way, it's 10.25 that way. But dynamically, when a golfer hits the ball, if they square that face up, that's where dynamically it changes the loft. So it's really not changing the loft of the driver. That loft of the driver, you couldn't take that driver and change it like this. Does that make sense? You can't take that hosel of the driver like you can an iron or a putter and go this way with it. You can only go like this. You're just spinning that head like that.
So you wanna look at the measurement now?
Yep. Now what he did was, he didn't just leave it wherever it sits, he squared it up.
So the loft changed
To?
12.
Right. So there you go. So if, now, what would happen if you just let this driver sit where it's supposed to? And you did not square it up?
Be back to 10 and a quarter.
10.25. I got 10 and a half. So it's the same exact driver, just pointing in a different direction, but if you take something that's pointing to the right, and then you square it up and close it, what happens to the loft? It becomes less dynamic loft. If you put that club in this way closed, and then that golfer hits it and they open that face, you're effectively adding dynamic loft. That's what the tip does. How about the lie angle?
But from a fitting standpoint, right? Someone wants to see the face more open, maybe you start with a higher loft. Someone wants to see the face more closed, you start with a lower loft. Because you can get them both to the same place, but what does a person want visually?
Yeah, that makes sense. So you may say that, oh, look at that. I don't know how that happened to have it on airplane mode.
Yeah, why? You're not on there.
That's what it does. All it changes is the face angle. Yes, Doc.
So Kirk, so when the Titleist, where you can de-loft it and make it more draw bias or fade bias, what's going on there?
Face angle.
It's still all face angles.
All
The
face
difference
angle.
between the making it more draw bias or fade bias, it's even more face angle if it's face bias and just a little less if you're de-lofting it, supposedly de-lofting it, but making it draw bias, you're still opening the face, basically.
Well, let's just say they call it draw bias because you're closing the face to the shaft line. So you're giving that golfer an opportunity to square the face during their swing. Say they call it draw bias, it's really they're just getting that golfer to have the ability to close the face better.
How?
Hold on.
Because it's only going in the,
Hold bias.
how the shaft's going in the
Yes,
outside.
piece.
But it's going on an angle. It's not going straight, it's going on an angle.
Yeah.
But obviously, you guys explained it's de-lofting any driver, basically. Just opening up.
Well, you're talking about de-lofting it in this axis, right? That's technique, right?
No, but I'm saying in the settings, they say you're taking either adding, or let's say just taking off 3/4 of a degree of loft. So
Yeah.
What they say, we know it's really just the driver sitting more open.
Yes, that's it.
So how do they do that? Sit more open, and they're saying that it's draw bias.
Well, they also have the lie angle. Maybe we talk about the lie angle adjustment they're talking about for draw bias. I mean, as I said before, irons, I don't try to use lie angle for ball flight, but on a driver at 250 yards, 1 degree off lie is going to mean what?
2 yards.
It's nothing.
So that lie angle adjustment on woods, the only time I'll introduce lie angles or when I encounter issues is when you get the golfer like me who has very low hands through the ball and doesn't have any droop, and my driver's coming in like 10 degrees this way, or you're a Pat McCarthy who toes down his driver, which is pretty tough to do, but he drives it great. I'll show you a face. There you are.
Get my water.
You're turning so red. So he's not going to have any issue with lie angles because the driver is going to be relatively level and it's on a tee. But when you start introducing this, where sometimes we see golfers, the lie angle is 14, 15 degrees toe up, and that thing is pointing way over there and they have a lot of problems starting the ball on line, or they hit the ground first. How often do you get like an M2 where you're trying to get the golfer to hit off the ground and they hit it fat all day? It's because the lie angle is so upright, they're actually hitting the ground first before they hit the ball. That's when we start talking about lie angle, really for trying to get a fairway or a hybrid to sit more level to the ground so it interacts better, or for the struggles like me guy that the driver comes in this way, so I have to now like drill out the tip and put it at an angle and make it flat and do all that stuff.
Don't try that at home, by the way. Not easy.
What about PXG?
Starts pretty flat.
Right?
Yeah. PXG does a really good job. PXG is the one company that their standard setting is the most upright setting, and then the other side is flatter. Where every other manufacturer, the standard setting is the flattest, and any other setting gets more upright. It just depends on, are you putting it in standard this way, or are you putting it in standard that way? It's based on the casting of it, what degrees that the manufacturer decides they want it in. Does anyone have any specific questions on, yeah?
Can you just talk about same length irons now?
April 5th. April 5th, we're going to do a Cobra seminar, and we're going to go over a lot of their products in single length. So
I tell you, go talk to Matt Dobbins, but he's not here.
Huh? No, it's going to be in the section newsletter anyway. So I didn't want to go through that whole, because it can really get elaborate. I'll just say in general, here's a good way to put it: is that every fitting system is based on 7 irons. So you fit 7 irons. Most people get 7 irons. How often have you actually had your customers comparing their own 5 irons to a 7-iron length 5 iron? And so far, for the average golfer who can't really hit a 5 iron, it's pretty good. So that's not really for the person who's looking for perfect distance gaps, because we all know, like all our students and our members hit the 5 iron exactly 10 yards further than their 6, and the 6 10 yards further than their 7, right? And they always do. It's just that one time during the course of a round they might. So that's where the value of that might be there. So if you want to hear a little bit more elaborate reasons and how they design it, that'll be April 5th.
Where is that going to be?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
Maybe fresh metal will be nice.
Perhaps.